정상 속도보다 빠르게 혹은 정상 속도보다 아주 느리게 들어보면 그 내용을 파악하기는 쉽지 않지만 오히려 그 언어의 고유한 억양과 소리에 더 예민해지기 때문에 더 쉽게 익숙해질 수도 있다고 하네요. 억지로 해석하지 말고 한번 편안하게 소리에 집중해 보시기 바랍니다.
We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money.
복잡한 문법이 아니라 간단한 원칙으로 영어 문장의 구조와 의미를 간단하게 파악하는 데 집중해서요. 영어 문장 구조가 결국에 이런 거구나 라고 느낄 수 있도록 연습해 봅니다. 자, 구조를 보면 딱 보이는 특이하고 재미있는 것이 있습니다. 저희가 보통 명사로 알고 있는 파트너가 동사로 사용됐네요. 파트너가 동사로 협력하다라는 의미로 사용되고 있는데요. We partnered. 우리는 협력했습니다. 누구랑요? With private companies. 민간 기업들과 협력을 했대요. 자, 그리고 구조를 파악하기 위해서 동사만 한번 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. asking, 변신한 동사고요. 그 다음에 뿌리 동사 is 나오고 going to keep, is going to earn. 가장 기본적인 동사들이 아주 적절하게 원칙을 잘 지켜가면서 짜임새 있는 균형 잡힌 구조로 표현된 것을 볼 수 있습니다. 자, 언어를 잘 사용한다는 것은 바로 이런 게 아닐까 싶기도 합니다. 자, 기본적인 단어들을 원칙에 맞게 아주 잘 사용하는 것, 그게 사실 중요한 거겠죠. 자, 그럼 구조와 의미를 한번 파악해 볼게요. We partnered, 우리는 협력했고요. 그리고 asking, 자, 변시한 동사인데요. 변시한 동사에도 반드시 주어는 존재합니다. 누가 주어죠? 누가 asking을 하는 걸까요? 자, 그런 걸 정확하게 파악하는 게 의미 파악에서의 첫 단추가 되는 거죠. 물론 이것은 테드라는 강연에서 말로 전달되는 거기 때문에 저희가 억양을 통해서 느껴야겠지만 이게 만약 글로 적혀 있는 내용이었다면 요 앞에 asking 앞에 콤마를 찍는 것이 원칙입니다. 왜 그러냐면 콤마가 없으면 이 asking 하고 있는 것의 주어가 누구냐라고 했을 때 private company라고 오해할 가능성이 있거든요. 콤마라는 구두점이 이 asking의 주어가 누구인지를 알려주는 힌트가 되기도 하는 거죠. 자, 우리가 협력을 했습니다. 민간 기업들과요. asking 이러이러한 질문을 던지면서요. 자, 어떤 질문이었냐면 Which of these salespeople 이러한 영업사원들 중 어떤 사람이 is going to keep their jobs 그들의 일자리를 유지하게 될까? 자, 앞에서도 which의 사용법이 좀 특이했는데요. 사람을 가리키는데 which를 사용해서 표현하고 있습니다. 자, which는 보통 의문문에서 어느 것, 어떤 것 이런 의미로 사용되지만 사람을 가리킬 수도 있습니다. 지원자들 중에 어떤 사람이, 환자들 중에 어떤 사람들이 이런 식으로요. 자, 그리고 또 한 가지 재미난 것은 이때 which는 단수인가 복수인가가 그냥 좀 자유롭게 결정되는 것 같아요. 동사를 그냥 단수로 쓰면 앞에를 단수로 받아들이는 거고요. 동사를 복수로 쓰면 그냥 복수로 받아들이는 것 같습니다. 지원자들 복수인데요. 뒤에 동사를 단수로 쓰게 되면 어떤 사람이 이렇게 해석하고요. 동사를 복수 형태로 쓰면 which를 어떤 사람들이 이렇게 복수로 해석을 하고 있네요. 자, 여기서도 which를 그냥 단수를 받았습니다. salespeople 복수지만 이런 영업사원들 중에서 어떤 사람이 하고 단수로 그냥 받았네요. is going to keep their jobs. and 그리고 who is going to earn the most money. 누가 가장 많은 돈을 벌게 될까? 이런 질문을 던지면서 이런 사람들은 어떤 특징을 갖고 있는가, 어떤 공통된 특징이 있는가 이런 거를 연구해 보고 있는 거죠.
We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money.
하루에 짧게 일부분만 집중해서 공부를 하고 대신에 매일 하루에 한 번씩 전체를 처음부터 끝까지 다 들어보고 다음 날에 이어서 일부분을 다시 집중해서 공부를 하고 영상 전체를 다 들어보고 자, 이렇게 영상 하나를 다 보고 나면 뭔가 달라지겠죠? 자, 일부분을 집중해서 공부를 해봤으니까요. 이제 전체 영상을 한번 편안하게 들어보세요.
When I was 27 years old, I left a very demanding job in management consulting for a job that was even more demanding, teaching. I went to teach 7th graders math in the New York City public schools. And like any teacher, I made quizzes and tests, I gave out homework assignments. When the work came back, I calculated grades. What struck me was that IQ was not the only difference between my best and my worst students. Some of my strongest performers did not have stratospheric IQ scores. Some of my smartest kids weren't doing so well. And that got me thinking. The kinds of things you need to learn in 7th grade math, sure, they're hard. Ratios, decimals, the area of a parallelogram. But these concepts are not impossible. And I was firmly convinced that every one of my students could learn the material if they worked hard and long enough. After several more years of teaching, I came to the conclusion that what we need in education is a much better understanding of students and learning from a motivational perspective, from a psychological perspective. In education, the one thing we know how to measure best is IQ. But what if doing well in school and in life depends on much more than your ability to learn quickly and easily? So I left the classroom and I went to graduate school to become a psychologist. I started studying kids and adults in all kinds of super challenging settings. And in every study, my question was, who is successful here and why? My research team and I went to West Point Military Academy. We tried to predict which cadets would stay in military training and which would drop out. We went to the National Spelling Bee and tried to predict which children would advance farthest in competition. We studied rookie teachers working in really tough neighborhoods, asking which teachers are still going to be here in teaching by the end of the school year. And of those, who will be the most effective at improving learning outcomes for their students? We partnered with private companies asking which of these salespeople is going to keep their jobs and who's going to earn the most money. In all those very different contexts, one characteristic emerged as a significant predictor of success. And it wasn't social intelligence, it wasn't good looks, physical health, and it wasn't IQ. It was grit. Grit is passion and perseverance for very long-term goals. Grit is having stamina. Grit is sticking with your future, day in, day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. Grit is living life like it's a marathon, not a sprint. A few years ago, I started studying grit in the Chicago public schools. I asked thousands of high school juniors to take grit questionnaires, and then waited around more than a year to see who would graduate. Turns out that grittier kids were significantly more likely to graduate, even when I matched them on every characteristic I could measure, things like family income, standardized achievement test scores, even how safe kids felt when they were at school. So it's not just at West Point or the National Spelling Bee that grit matters, it's also in school, especially for kids at risk for dropping out. To me, the most shocking thing about grit is how little we know, how little science knows about building it. Every day, parents and teachers ask me, how do I build grit in kids? What do I do to teach kids a solid work ethic? How do I keep them motivated for the long run? The honest answer is, I don't know. What I do know is that talent doesn't make you gritty. Our data show very clearly that there are many talented individuals who simply do not follow through on their commitments. In fact, in our data, grit is usually unrelated or even inversely related to measures of talent. So far, the best idea I've heard about building grit in kids is something called growth mindset. This is an idea developed at Stanford University by Carol Dweck, and it is the belief that the ability to learn is not fixed, that it can change with your effort. Dr. Dweck has shown that when kids read and learn about the brain and how it changes and grows in response to challenge, they're much more likely to persevere when they fail because they don't believe that failure is a permanent condition. So growth mindset is a great idea for building grit, but we need more. And that's where I'm going to end my remarks, because that's where we are. That's the work that stands before us. We need to take our best ideas, our strongest intuitions, and we need to test them. We need to measure whether we've been successful, and we have to be willing to fail, to be wrong, to start over again with lessons learned. In other words, we need to be gritty about getting our kids grittier. Thank you.
영어 문장 속에서 동사가 등장할 수 있는 방법은 딱 세 가지밖에 없습니다. 뿌리거나 뿌리가 아니면 변신 혹은 숨어서 나오는 거죠.